Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on ESG data requirements under MiCA. I'm Josh Peschko, the Global Head of Compliance and Regulatory Strategy at Talos. As a leading provider of institutional trading and portfolio technology for digital assets, Talos is dedicated to supporting our clients through the evolving regulatory landscape around the world. Today, we're here to talk more about the often overlooked ESG requirements under MiCA. As many of you are aware, MiCA is an EU regulation aimed at harmonizing crypto asset market rules across member states. One of the key and often overlooked components of MiCA is the emphasis on sustainability through ESG disclosures. And as of December 30th of this past year, crypto asset service providers, or CASPs, must report on a variety of ESG metrics, including energy consumption, carbon emissions, and the use of renewable energy in crypto operations. Our guest today is the CEO of Crypto Risk Metrics, Tim Zölitz, a leading provider of ESG data for crypto assets. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's dive in. Let's set the stage here a little bit. Could you start by outlining the specific ESG data points that CASPs are required to disclose under MiCA?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, the ESG requirements under MiCA are truly interesting because like the current stage where the indicators come from was a long way, while the real process of implementing MiCA or creating MiCA, better said, there were different tons of voices from like banning all proof of work blockchains because they're too energy intensive, from leaving ESG part totally out of the MiCA. So this was an up and down, and I would say the current existing disclosures are more or less a compromise between different voices within the process. So it was a really tough time to see that, but now there are existing disclosures, as you mentioned. They are defined within MiCA Article 66.5 and apply to issuers of crypto asset white papers, as well as to crypto asset service providers to generally disclose adverse impacts on the environment as well as on the climate. So the MiCA stays quite unspecific regarding the concrete indicators that were specified by the ESMA in regulatory standards after the MiCA. And currently there are up to 16 different indicators or data fields, however you want to name it, which have to be disclosed per crypto asset, which is under the coverage of the crypto asset service provider. These indicators or data fields contain data fields which are like qualitative informations, like descriptions text on the consensus mechanism regarding the incentive structure of the network, and of course the more interesting ones, the quantitative informations, the real numbers on, for example, the energy consumption, on the carbon footprint, on the intensities of the crypto assets. So for example, how much energy does one transaction within Bitcoin really consumes, and other ones as well. So currently there are up to 16 indicators. For some crypto asset service providers, they only have to disclose 11 of them, but in every case, there needs to be disclosed the one main indicator, which is the energy consumption for the crypto assets. And for many crypto asset service providers, 5 others comes along with that. So up to 16 different ones, which you have to disclose. And just one thing regarding this, if we talk about crypto ESG, I'm using the same term. We are only talking about the E within ESG. So all the indicators are only about the sustainability, the energy component within ESG. So nothing about social, nothing about governance, only the E, but the term ESG is quite common when we talk about the MiCA ESG stuff.
Great, yeah. So why is this challenging for CASPs? And how do you guys assist CASPs in overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, I think the most important challenge is that it's just super complex to come up with reliant and serious data about this. To give you an impression, we work on this topic with several people for more than a year full time to come up with reliant and serious data to really come up with a methodology, which is not just an Excel file where you set a work student on for 2 weeks. This is really serious work to get the measurement data, to come up with a methodology to set it up in an reliant and operational stable way. This is just complex to do and a lot of effort. You just need many hours to do so. And as a CASP within the MiCA license or registration process, you normally don't have so much capacity left to set up a new product feature or anything related to that. So it's just a lot of effort. And next to the one-time effort, which you maybe think it is, you still have to maintain it, because the regulator did a little bit of hiding there. They said you only have to disclose it once per year and only have to update it once per year, with one exception: if there are material changes within the data. So if there's, for example, a significant change within the energy consumption within the calendar year, you have to disclose them ad hoc and update them instantaneously. So, which that basically means you have to monitor them on a continuous basis, which basically says you have to calculate them daily. So you even have to maintain them. And of course, no one wants to deal with it, since it's really operational effort you have to put in. And this is just hard to fulfill as a crypto asset service provider, which has like the normal business stuff to do as well, to fulfill that also. So I think as crypto risk metrics, we can mainly support by providing the data and take off the pain of like coming up with the data, coming up with the methodology, and as well maintaining all that, since we calculate them daily for months now, or even years. We have the experience, we have the models, we have the methodology, we have the data sources, we have the technical implementation, and can do that in an operational stable way. So as a CASP, you can get the data from us in several ways, via an API, in different data formats, Excel, PDF, CSV. So we mainly take the pain away by just providing the data in the most easiest way for the client. I think that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on this, and I think it's an important point. And when I think about this is not something that the CASPs are naturally doing. They're applying for licenses for certain activities with crypto assets, and this requirement certainly can pose a challenge for a team to come up and comply with. So, and partnering with the likes of you certainly can help. Let's dive a little bit more into that. So tell me about the methodology that you guys use, and how does it look like when you work with customers?
Sure. Of course, when we talk about the methodology, you have to be aware of that there, of course, are different type of methodology for the different types of networks which are out there. Of course, you have tons of different opportunities on how a network can look like. You have different types of incentive structures within it, of course, and this is more or less the central one, different types of consensus mechanisms, especially, for example, proof of work, proof of stake, but still tons of others which are out there. Then you even have DLT networks, which are not even blockchains, like DHGs or any others. So there are a ton of different opportunities on how a network can look like. And therefore, of course, there's no one-fits-all approach to come up with these numbers. So, of course, this is not possible to come up with that. But, of course, we have individual approaches for the network. And as I could probably talk hours only about the methodology, I brought only one example with me to show it in a simple way on how it could look like if we come up with numbers for a proof of stake network, for example, for Ethereum. If we look into the proof of stake networks, for example, the center of the rule methodology are, of course, the nodes within the networks. Since the nodes are the entities within the network which are really running hardware devices, and of course, the hardware devices are these kind of entities which are consuming the energy which you have to report. So if you want to come up with the number on how much energy, for example, Ethereum consumes, you have to calculate the energy consumption of all the different nodes which are under scope of the MiCA. And of course, there's a next challenge coming with that. Of course, all the nodes are different within the network. You have full nodes, you have light nodes, you have archive nodes. The nodes can run different types of software. They can, of course, use different kind of hardware. And I think that's obvious that the energy consumption of different types of hardware is different. And even of different types of software, it is different. Running on the same hardware, using different softwares, the energy consumption changes. They're standing in different locations. So, for example, if it comes to the energy mix within the energy grid, it's, of course, important to know where the node is. So just saying it's really tough to get the data to come up with good assumptions there to say, okay, these kinds of nodes are running within the network, but the nodes are like the center of the methodology when it comes to the proof of stake networks. Of course, to work with the complexity, you have to use different data sources for this. And one key data source, of course, is the energy consumption for a single node within the network. And as I mentioned, of course, there are different types of opportunities which you can use to run hardware. But there are, of course, some hardware classes which you can find in every network. And for that hardware classes, we use crypto risk metrics, do measurements within ISO certified testing centers. So what we are doing, you see on the right picture there, we go to the German TÜV. So you probably already heard that I'm coming from Germany regarding my accent, but the TÜV is like the most German thing you can imagine. Everything is standardized, everything goes by the protocol. So like everything you think about Germany is true at the TÜV. And there we go, bring our devices. We bring devices which you can use in proof of stake networks, which you can use in proof of work networks. You see on the right, for example, some miners on the white table. And then we put them in a like certified testing chamber. And then we calculate how much energy does these devices really consume when they're doing mining, when they're running different types of client software. And in that way, we can make sure to come up with good estimates on what a single device within the network really consumes on energy. Of course, the devices are equipped with the node software, so they're really doing what they would do if they're running at a like real node outside of the measurement. And this is the best way for us to say, okay, we really know, okay, if you run this type of hardware, this type of software, you consume that amount of energy. And of course, the TÜV is like the highest quality standards where it comes from. The data is ISO certified. And yeah, this is what we do to come up with estimate on a single node. But of course, you need other informations as well. The energy consumption for a single node is, of course, only one part of the equation. You also need other informations on the network structure itself. So basically said, you have to know how many nodes are running within the network. You have to know what type of software they're running. You have to analyze the different types of client softwares, etc. You have to look at transaction on-chain, etc. So there's a lot of other things coming into the equation as well. I think one interesting thing are the so-called crawlers, which we are using for the biggest networks. We don't have them deployed for every network, just for transparency reasons. But for the biggest one, we already have them and develop them on our own. Crawlers are like dedicated search algorithms, which you can deploy within the DLT network. And they are like, have a communication protocol to find the different nodes within the network, then count them, get information about them regarding where they're located, which is super important when it comes to the carbon footprint. And in that way, we have different data sources which all come together and then can be thrown into our algorithms. And then we come up with like an energy consumption of a network. This sounds complex. It is complex. To be fully transparent, of course, the numbers we bring up are never like the exact number. This is simply not possible to say, okay, Ethereum or Bitcoin consumed that amount of energy. This is not possible to say. But yeah, relying on that type of quality on the data, relying on that type of like software we are using, on processes we are using, we are like pretty confident that our like assumption and the estimate we come up with are quite close to the real like energy consumption. But just to make that fully transparent, I wouldn't say, okay, this is the energy consumption. This is simply not possible to do. But in that way, you have the like best data you can get, and I'm really confident to present that.
That's talk about complexity. I mean, those slides are wonderful, and they do a great job of demonstrating again kind of what we talked about, like picturing a CASP with those sorts of hardware setups to monitor all the data really just isn't in their scope of work and their expertise. And I think that those slides did a good job of demonstrating that there. Switching gears a little bit here. So something that I saw that made headlines was your partnership with the Digital Token Identifier Foundation. So for the viewers that aren't who are more unfamiliar with the DTIF, you mind talking a little bit about what that is and why is that significant?
Sure, absolutely. So thanks for mentioning that, because these partnerships really make us proud, because this is one of the most interesting ones for us, and because it really confirms the high efforts which we put into that. But yeah, first of all, the DTIF is the Digital Token Identifier Foundation. This is a non-profit organization that maintains an like database and registry for crypto assets according to ISO standards. And there are like more or less the recommended database or the recommended registry from the ESMA to use for CASPs. So basically, the DTIF is the entity which is also allowed in cooperation with ANR to issue ISINs for crypto assets. So this is really like the central database, the central registry for regulatory purposes, for regulatory data when it comes to crypto assets. And within the corporation, we were already allowed to put in our risk data for crypto assets for like more than a year now. So we were already closely working together with them, and back then just already made us proud. And then, of course, we were even more happier to put in also our ESG data as the exclusive data provider within the database. So currently you can find our ESG data for a ton of crypto asset within that database. And of course, this is super important to us since it sends a really strong signal with regard to compliance, I would say. And yeah, therefore it was really a really good one for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really, that exclusive relationship is super valuable and helps integrate everything. You talked a little bit about ESMA. So how do you collaborate with ESMA and all the other regulatory bodies and to stay ahead of all this? MiCA, is now live, but certainly will evolve. So what do you do to keep tabs with them and discuss with them?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, it's still quite dynamic, even if it is in place. There's still a lot of things going on, and we of course try to work closely together with the ESMA itself, with the Commission, with the national authorities. So there are a ton of entities, involved in this, and you maybe would assume that they all have the same opinion on things. No, they don't. So it's even more complex than you might imagine in the first place. But of course, we try to get in close communication with them. For the relevant ones, we already have good contact person. We are trying to walk through the regulation and say, okay, just to give an example, many of the issues or harder things only come up if you really come up with the data. Like the regulator puts it in the legal forms, and then we come up with the data and says, okay, you have an formatting here which doesn't apply to the data which you are calculating if you really do it. And then we try to talk with them and say, okay, I know you have this legal form here, we have the data here, how we can make this work, how should we display it, how do you want to have it displayed? Because our main goal is to make our clients compliant. So we will 100% ensure that everything we publish is aligned with the ESMA, with the national authorities. And this can only be ensured by talking to them. For the most of the national authorities, I would say we already presented our methodology, our data sources, walk them through and say, okay, this is how we do this. If there are any questions arising or any definition stuff which is missing, we talk them through and say, okay, this is the way how we interpret it. Do you see it the same way? Would you like us to include other things? Would you like us to exclude this, etc.? So it's really absolutely cooperative, and we try to make this work in practice. And I didn't really thought it would work that good at the beginning, to be honest. I would say that, or I assume that it would be harder to find a cooperation with them. Of course, you're not cooperating with the national authorities, but you find a good way to work it through. Then they know the clients have to implement it. We have the clients implement it. We try to find the best way on how to make this work. And of course, for the clients, it has the benefit that they can make sure that the national authorities knows where the data comes from. And this, of course, makes it much easier there. And especially for us, it's important to be involved in the further developments because, as you mentioned, it's dynamic. There will come up other things. And in any way, if the regulator says, okay, we want to change that, we want to have new obligations, we want to change the current one, of course, we are ready to adapt since we are involved in the process there.
Yeah. Collaboration is so great. It sounds like you've done so much of it. Regulators knowing crypto risk metrics and having that comfort and that knowledge really does go a long way with some of this stuff, especially when it's some of these things that are just required. A customer saying, we use crypto risk metrics sometimes makes the conversation a lot easier and a lot shorter for regulators. So anyway, what's next? What else are you guys planning, working on? What have you been busy with to help support clients in this domain?
Yeah. I mentioned that I'm already super confident with our data, but of course, this is nothing which stops in the development. We are, of course, still trying to develop new crawlers and improve our existing methodology, find any spots where we can verify more of the assumptions, do more measurements within the ISO certified testing chambers, work closer to the universities, which we collaborate with when it comes to the callers. We just trying to improve. While that, of course, it's important for us to stay independent. This is more or less the most important one. While doing all this, we don't want to get paid by layer 1 protocols. To stay neutral by providing the indicators. This is super important to us because it brings the clients into a situation where they could be accused for greenwashing, because this is just a problem which can arise. And while staying independent, I would just say, even improve it, verify our data sources, come up with more data sources, cover more assets, etc. Just improve what we are already doing.
Makes sense. So we received a bunch of questions from the audience. Everybody's very active, which we very appreciate all of that. I think many of them, or we hope many of them, have been answered so far through this awesome presentation and conversation with Tim. I think one question that we didn't get to that was mentioned a few different times, I'm trying to combine a few different questions here. You already gave an example with a proof of stake, like an ETH, but how do you approach something for Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Since this is like the other big model out in the market, the example I brought up was the bottom-up approach for Bitcoin or proof of work networks. They mainly used model or methodology as the top-down approach. Within the top-down approach, this is a model which were introduced by Mark Berendt some years ago and were more or less popularized by the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. And we adapt to that model, changed some things here and there, but basically we use the top-down model for this. Within the model, you have like one base assumption, which says that all the miners within the networks are acting rational, which basically means they only do mining when they can earn money with that. And you have like empirical sizes like the hash rate within the network, which you can calculate from the difficulty. If you have the hash rate within the network, you can make assumptions on, okay, within Bitcoin network, they are mainly running so-called ASIC miners. So this specifies specific devices which are only being used to mine Bitcoin. And you have some, data points to the devices. For example, a device can be or can produce like 3,000 hashes a second to come up with any number. And okay, the hash rate of the network is there. The hash rate of a single device is there. Then you have a base assumption on, okay, how many devices can be running within the network. To make it a little bit more complex, there are, of course, a ton of different devices which you can use. So we have a own database for all the different devices which can be deployed in this hash algorithm. Because, of course, in proof of stake work network, you have different hash algorithms. In terms of Bitcoin, you're talking about SHA-256. So we have a database for SH-256 of the different devices you can deploy there. We know, okay, the devices are countable of producing so and so many hashes. They're consuming that amount of power. This is what we can verify within the measurements. And then we can build up a model within the top-down approach and say, okay, we can calculate the hash rate from the difficulty. The difficulty is in the blocks. And then we can say, okay, based on the database, we know these types of devices can be run to earn money within the networks. Some don't because they are less efficient. And the profits you can earn as a miner from the block rewards or from the transaction fees are simple to low to cover your electricity costs. So they are not profitable. Some miners are profitable and they are included within the calculation. So there's a leftover pool of all the profitable devices. And within that pool, you build up a distribution function to say, okay, these devices are a little bit more represented, these are a little bit less represented. And then you can come up with real numbers on how many of the devices are used within the network and then come closer to the energy consumption. Of course, we are always trying to verify these assumptions with, for example, mining pools or providers of the hardware and the software for these devices, because you can imagine most of the hash rate is generated from mining pools. It's not like back in the days where I run on my MacBook Bitcoin mining. This is not the usual case, I would say. So I would say most of the hashing power comes from bigger installations, like mining pools. And of course, we try to contact them and say, okay, what type of devices are you running? What type of power consumption do you have? What kind of power efficiency do you have? etc., to verify all the different variables which you put into our model to say, okay, we have this like theoretical thing, but of course always trying to verify that in a like practical manner to really say, okay, we do something and this is really what happens in the world out there.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Very detailed. So I think we're wrapping up here. First, thank you very much, Tim. This stuff is fascinating, and again, I think you did an awesome job running the viewers through it. As we discussed, the ESG data requirements under MiCA, it can be a real headache for CAS. If you're trying to navigate through these, partnering with somebody like Crypto Risk Metrics can really help provide the tools and guidance you need to make sure you can comply with an area that probably isn't your expertise. As we wrap up, if you have further questions or wish to learn more about how Talos and Crypto Risk Metrics can assist you through your MiCA journey, always please feel free to reach out. And thank you all for attending.
Thanks for having me, Josh.